My name is Maya Lee. I'm 31 years old, and a few weeks ago my own brother laughed in my face and told me I was too poor to sit at the same table as the rest of our family. We were on a video call when he said it, grinning into the camera like it was the funniest joke he'd ever made. "Come on, you? At this place? Be serious. You can't afford to eat where we're going," he scoffed, while my parents and a couple of relatives chuckled along. I smiled through the sting, the way I'd learned to do since I was a kid. But inside, something snapped. That night, after the call ended, I stared at the booking system on my laptop and saw their reservation pop up under my family name, table for 8, Friday at 7:30 p.m. They had chosen, without knowing, the one restaurant in the city where I'm not too poor to sit down, because I pay the staff, I sign the checks, and every plate that leaves the kitchen is a piece of my life. They had no idea. On Friday, I put on my black tailored jacket, pinned my name badge over my heart, and stepped out of my office. The dining room was already humming with low conversation and clinking glasses. My staff knew the plan. No one was allowed to mention who owned the place. I took my position by the host stand just as the door opened and my family walked in, dressed like they were arriving at some exclusive club, talking loudly about how expensive and high-end this spot was. They didn't even recognize me at first under the warm lights and professional uniform. My brother glanced around with that smug little smile, bragging about how he'd managed to get a table here, while my parents nodded proudly, still thinking I was barely scraping by somewhere in a tiny kitchen across town. I waited until they were all gathered in front of me, menus in hand, comments about prices already forming on their lips. Then I stepped forward, looked straight at my brother and said, "Good evening. Welcome to my restaurant. It might be a bit expensive. Is the table under your name? Or shall I look it up under mine?" His smile froze. The color drained from his face as his eyes dropped to my name badge. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "You want to know what happened to him and to the rest of my family after that moment?" We'll rewind a bit because this dinner had been cooking for years before they ever walked through my doors. Before I take you back to the phone call, the lies, and the moment my brother realized he'd been flexing inside my own restaurant, tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are, and which country are you watching from? I want to see just how far this family drama and revenge story can travel. I didn't become too poor for the family overnight. Growing up, I was always the kid who brought home good but not spectacular grades. The one who helped in the kitchen, who stayed late to clean up after parties while my older brother, Ethan, collected applause like it was oxygen. Ethan was the golden child, the one who got the new sneakers first, the one whose trophies were displayed on a special shelf in the living room. I remember watching my mother, Linda, dust those trophies every Sunday, smiling like each one of his victories gave her life a new purpose. My father, Robert, would sit at the table, bragging about Ethan's internships and future prospects in finance, while I cleared the plates in the background, invisible. When I told them I wanted to cook for a living, they laughed. "Cooking is a hobby, Maya, not a career," my dad said. Ethan snorted and added, "Unless you want to be stuck in some greasy diner your whole life." So I learned to keep my dreams quiet. In college, while Ethan studied business and strutted around in suits for his presentations, I worked 2 jobs, barista in the mornings, line cook at night, saving every spare dollar I could. I studied culinary arts on the side, picked up shifts in different kitchens, and obsessively scribbled menu ideas in a battered notebook. Ethan loved to show off every milestone, the job at a big real estate firm, the new car, the fancy watch he definitely couldn't afford, but wore like it was part of his skin. On social media, he became that guy who posted rooftop cocktails and captions about grinding and winning. Our relatives ate it up, calling him the successful one. When I finally opened my restaurant, After years of scrubbing pans, working double shifts, and betting everything I had on a tiny, imperfect space, I didn't invite my family to the soft opening. It wasn't spite. It was self-protection. I had watched them dismiss every step of my journey. I wanted one place in the world where their doubt couldn't reach me. My friend Sophia, who'd known me since college and had become a food writer, came to that opening. She cried when she saw my name on the lease, when she tasted the first dish I sent out. A few months later, she published a glowing review, calling my cooking fiercely personal and fearless. Thanks to her article and word of mouth, reservations slowly climbed. But at home, around my parents' dinner table, all I ever heard was Ethan talking about square footage, commissions, and bonuses. "How's your little kitchen gig?" he'd ask, smirking. "Still slicing onions?" So when he called me about the big family dinner and casually dropped the line, "You're too poor for this place anyway," it wasn't a one-off insult. It was the sharp edge of a knife that had been carving into me for years. He bragged about how exclusive the restaurant was, how he'd managed to get a table where people like us usually have to wait weeks. He didn't know or care where I was in my own life. He never asked. The worst part? My parents laughed along. They didn't push back or tell him he was being cruel. They just let the joke settle, like it was the most natural thing in the world to rank their own children by perceived income. That night, when the video call ended, I stared at my reflection in the dark laptop screen. A question I know many people in families like mine have asked themselves floated through my mind. How many times can you be humiliated by the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally before you finally stand up and flip the script? The thing is, Ethan wasn't entirely wrong about one detail. On paper, I didn't look rich. I lived in a small apartment above the restaurant. I wore the same black work pants until the seams thinned, and most of my money went straight back into the business, paying my staff fairly, upgrading equipment, experimenting with new dishes. My bank account didn't scream success, but my reservations list, my fully booked weekends, and the quiet joy on my customers' faces when they took their first bites told a different story. On the afternoon after that call, I was in my small office at the back of the restaurant, going through invoices, when a notification popped up on my screen. New reservation, La Family, 8 guests, Friday 7:30 p.m. For a moment, I thought it was a glitch, some cruel joke my brain was playing on me. Then I looked closer and saw Ethan's email address as the contact. He had booked my restaurant, the one he assumed I was too poor to dine in, because he had no idea it was mine. I leaned back in my chair and laughed, a short, unbelieving sound that turned into something darker. I could have canceled the reservation. I could have called him and told him the truth, avoided the entire showdown. But another thought slid in, quiet and sharp. What if I didn't? What if, for once, I let reality speak louder than my explanations? I called Sophia. "You're not going to believe this," I said as soon as she picked up. After I explained, there was a beat of silence, then a low whistle. "Maya, that's Karma with a reservation number," she said. "What are you going to do?" I spun a pen between my fingers, staring at the booking on the screen. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Part of me wants to hide in the kitchen and let them eat, then accidentally walk past at the end of the night and see if they notice. Part of me wants to greet them at the door and watch Ethan choke on his own ego." "You've been shrinking yourself for them your whole life," Sophia replied gently. "Maybe it's time to show up as the full version of who you are. But whatever you do, don't make this about destroying him. Make it about claiming you." Her words sunk in. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming the story of my life, from the girl who was always less than to the woman who built something out of nothing. Over the next few days, while I prepped stock and checked produce deliveries, my mind replayed old scenes. Ethan rolling his eyes at my uniforms, my parents asking if I had considered a more stable job, relatives asking when I would settle down and get serious, as if 18-hour days in a kitchen weren't serious enough. Each memory fueled a slow, steady resolve. On Thursday night, I gathered my core staff after service. Line cooks, servers, host. My family booked a table tomorrow, I told them. They don't know I own this place. Yes, there's drama. No, I'm not going to bring it into your work. But I might need your help with one thing. I don't want anyone mentioning that I'm the owner unless I do it first. For them, I'm just the manager tonight. Understood? They exchanged glances, then nodded. My sous chef grinned. So we're feeding the villain, huh? He joked. I smiled back, feeling that familiar mix of nerves and excitement I get before a busy service. We're feeding my family, I said, and maybe serving a side of truth. As I walked home, the city lights blurred around me. I found myself wondering, if you had the chance to let the people who never believed in you walk straight into the world you built, without warning, would you take it? Friday came faster than I expected. The day was a blur of chopping, marinating, tasting, and checking every detail twice. I adjusted the lighting, made sure the music playlist hit that perfect balance between moody and welcoming, and double-checked the specials board even though I knew it by heart. I wanted the restaurant to feel like itself, not like a stage set for a family confrontation. By 6:45 p.m., the first wave of customers had arrived, filling the space with conversation and the soft clink of cutlery. At 7:20, I stepped into the small staff room and changed into my front-of-house jacket instead of my usual kitchen apron. I pinned my name badge, Maya, owner and chef, over my chest, then paused. For a second, fear whispered, what if they laugh even at this? What if they roll their eyes and say it's just a cute little place? But underneath the fear was a quiet pride. This restaurant was the sum of years of sacrifice. Whatever they said couldn't erase that. At 7:30 sharp, the door swung open. I saw them before they saw me. Ethan walked in first, wearing a tailored suit that tried a little too hard. He scanned the room with the air of someone who believes every space he steps into belongs to him. My parents followed, my mother clutching her bag, my father adjusting his jacket, and behind them came a couple of relatives, talking about parking and traffic and how fancy the place looked. Wow, this is nice, my mother said, looking around approvingly. I didn't know places like this were even in this neighborhood. I told you, Ethan replied, his voice just loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. This spot is one of the most exclusive in the city. Took some strings to pull, but you know me. He laughed, and one of my cousins echoed it. My chest tightened. I watched them from behind a group of guests waiting to be seated. For a moment, I was 10 years old again, standing in the doorway of our living room while Ethan showed off a certificate, and my parents beamed. But I wasn't a kid anymore. I stepped out from behind the host stand, smoothing my jacket. Good evening, I said, letting my professional voice take over. Welcome. They turned toward me, and for a heartbeat there was no recognition, just polite half-smiles the way people give staff they assume will fade into the background. Then my mother squinted slightly. Maya? She asked. What are you doing here? Ethan's brows knitted together. Wait, you work here? The way he said work made it sound like serve. I held his gaze, feeling the old urge to shrink, to apologize for existing, rise and then dissolve. Yes, I said evenly. I work here. I paused, then added, let me get you seated. We've been expecting you. I led them through the dining room, weaving between tables where couples laughed and friends clinked glasses over shared plates I had designed. My family's conversation shifted to prices on the menu, to how they'd heard this was a place you need to know someone to get into. Ethan basked in that attention, letting them assume he was the one who knew someone. I seated them at a long table near the open kitchen, where they could see the flames, the swift moves of my team, the controlled chaos I had learned to love. "Your server will be right with you," I said. My mother reached for my hand. "Maya, honey, you didn't tell us you got a job in a place like this," she said, sounding genuinely impressed for the first time in my life. "See?" Ethan added with a smirk. "Maybe all that cooking finally got you somewhere?" There it was again, that small, sharp twist in his words. I smiled politely, but inside, something settled. I wasn't here to convince them with speeches or defend my choices. I didn't need to. The truth was all around us. In the sizzling pans, the full tables, the reservation list with their name on it. As I stepped back toward the host stand, I caught Sophia slipping in through the door. She'd reserved a table for one near the corner. She lifted her phone slightly and mouthed, "I'm here." The support in her eyes steadied me. The scene was set. Now the real dinner, and everything it would reveal, was about to begin. The first courses went out flawlessly. My team moved like a well-rehearsed dance, and I stayed mostly in the kitchen, checking plates, calling out orders, tasting sauces. From the pass, I could see my family sampling the food. My father's posture relaxed as he chewed. My mother's eyes widened with each bite. Ethan, of course, kept his composure, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. At one point, he pointed at a dish and said loudly, "Now this is what I call real food, not that comfort nonsense." He didn't know that dish was inspired by our grandmother's soup, the one I used to make with her while he was out with his friends. As the main courses arrived, the conversation at their table grew animated. I caught bits and pieces: presentation, flavors, must cost a fortune. My cousin joked about needing to split the bill into 6 credit cards. Ethan laughed and said, "Relax. If it gets too crazy, I'll handle it." That's what happens when you work hard, right? The arrogance in his voice was like a match to dry tinder inside me. I signaled my sous chef to take over the line for a few minutes and wiped my hands on a clean towel. It was time. I stepped out into the dining room again, the familiar buzz of service wrapping around me. I made a quick stop at Sophia's table. "How's everything?" I asked. She smiled. "Food's perfect," she said, "but I'm really here for the show." "This isn't about humiliating him," I murmured, more to myself than to her. "I know," she replied. "It's about the truth." I approached my family's table just as they finished their mains. "How is everything tonight?" I asked, standing at a polite distance. My mother turned toward me, her face glowing. "This is incredible, Maya," she said. "You should see if they'll let you bring some leftovers home. Maybe your boss would let you take a few extra shifts here. This place must pay well." The words hit me like a light slap, unintentionally hurtful, but hurtful all the same. My boss. My shifts. Ethan smirked. "Yeah, maybe if you work hard enough, you'll be able to afford to eat here one day," he added, repeating the joke from our call, apparently not satisfied with humiliating me just once. I felt the table quiet slightly, a few relatives shifting in their seats. It was subtle, but cracks were forming in the easy laughter. I took a breath, steadying my voice. "I'm glad you like the food," I said. "It means a lot to me." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a crisp, folded paper, the night's tasting menu, with a small logo at the top. The restaurant's name, and beneath it, chef and owner, Maya Lee. I placed one in front of my mother, then my father, then, finally, Ethan. "In fact," I continued, "it means even more because this menu is my work. Every dish you've eaten tonight, I designed it. Every decision in this restaurant, from the plates to the lighting to the playlist, that's mine too." There was a beat of silence as they looked down at the paper. My mother's eyes darted to the bottom of the page, then snapped back up to my face. "Owner?" she whispered. My father's lips parted, a question dying there as he reread my name. Ethan stared, frozen. You're… what? The head chef? Like, in charge of the kitchen? I didn't break eye contact. I'm the head chef, I said. And the owner. This is my restaurant. The color drained from his face, just like it had in that flash-forward moment at the entrance. No, that's not… You're joking. He laughed, but it came out brittle. A cousin leaned in, curious. Wait, like you own it? All of this? I nodded. Lease, staff, menu, everything. I signed the papers 2 years ago. At the next table, someone recognized Sophia and whispered, Is that the critic who wrote that review? I saw my brother's eyes flick toward her, then back to me. You knew about this? He asked my parents, almost accusing. My mother shook her head slowly. Maya, why didn't you tell us? There it was, the question I'd been waiting for. Because every time I tried to share a piece of my life with you, it turned into a comparison with him, I replied quietly. Every job, every step was cute or temporary or not real success. So I stopped inviting that judgment into the one space that made me feel like myself. My words landed heavy on the table. A distant clink of glassware from another part of the restaurant punctuated the silence. Ethan opened his mouth again, desperate to claw back control. Okay, let's say this is true, he said, forcing a shrug. You still live above the place, right? You look exhausted all the time. Meanwhile, I cut in gently. You're calling your sister too poor to sit at a table in a restaurant she built from nothing. Maybe the question isn't about where we eat or how much we pay. Maybe it's about what we respect. I let that sink in before adding, By the way, speaking of paying, the bill tonight is already taken care of. Consider it my treat. You're my guests. That last line twisted everything. Up until now, Ethan had been performing as the generous provider. In a single sentence, I'd flipped that narrative. A flush crept up his neck. You don't have to do that, my father murmured. But it was half-hearted, uncertain. Sophia chose that moment to walk by, pausing at our table. Sorry to interrupt, she said politely, but I just wanted to compliment the chef. The owner really outdid herself tonight. She winked at me, then continued on. My family watched her go, pieces of the puzzle finally snapping into place. They weren't just eating in some random high-end spot. They were sitting inside my life's work. If the night had ended there with shock and a few awkward compliments, it might have been just a satisfying twist. But families are rarely that simple, and neither is karma. After the reveal, conversation at the table fractured. My mother kept glancing between the menu and me, as if reconciling two different versions of her daughter. My father grew quiet, staring at his hands. A couple of relatives started asking eager questions. How many staff I had, how long I'd been open, whether I planned to expand. Ethan, however, withdrew into a brooding silence. I could see the math running behind his eyes, counting all the times he'd made me the punchline of his jokes, all the stories he'd told about being the only real success in the family. Eventually, he pushed back his chair and stood. I need some air, he muttered, walking toward the bar area. I watched him go, part of me tempted to just let him stew. But this dinner wasn't just about shock. It was about finally saying the things I'd swallowed for years. I followed him, stopping a few feet away. You okay? I asked. He laughed without humor. Am I okay? He repeated. You just humiliated me in front of everyone, Maya. I blinked. Humiliated you? Ethan, I invited you into my restaurant, fed you the best food I can make, and covered the bill. I didn't make you say I was too poor. You did that on your own. He turned, eyes flashing. I was joking. That's how we talk. No, I said quietly. That's how you talk. And everyone else has been too used to it, or too scared to call you out. His jaw clenched. You think you're better than me now? Because you have your name on a sign? This isn't about better, I replied. It's about honest. You've built your identity on being the successful one. But how much of that is real, Ethan? The question hung there between us. He looked away, and in that sideways glance, I saw it. Cracks in his perfect image. Dark circles under his eyes. The way his phone lit up with notifications he kept sliding away without letting me see. My life is none of your business, he muttered. Funny, I said softly. My life has always been your business. What I eat, where I work, how much I earn. You've turned it into material for your jokes for years. He shoved his hands into his pockets. You wouldn't understand. You don't carry the pressure I do. I almost laughed. You mean the pressure of being praised for breathing? Of having mom and dad cheer every tiny success while they questioned every decision I made? His shoulders slumped for a moment. Then, to my surprise, he said, You think it's easy keeping up this image? The apartment? The car? The dinners? I'm drowning in debt, Maya. If this deal I'm working on doesn't land, I'm finished. The admission stunned me. It didn't excuse his cruelty, but it shifted the ground under my anger. So you tear me down to feel like you're still on top? I replied quietly. Because if I'm too poor, then at least you're not at the bottom. He didn't deny it. Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. From the dining room, I could hear my mother's voice introducing me to a relative. She owns the place. Can you believe it? For once, the disbelief sounded more odd than dismissive. Here's the thing, I continued. I didn't invite you here to watch you crash and burn. I invited you into the truth. You're not a god, Ethan. You're a person who's made choices. Some good, some not. Same as me. The difference is, I'm done letting your fear and arrogance dictate who I'm allowed to be. He scoffed. So what? Now you're the hero? And I'm the villain? You made yourself the villain when you decided your ego mattered more than your sister's dignity. I said, Tonight is your chance to step out of that role. But whether you take it or not, that's on you. His eyes glistened for a second, then he swallowed hard. What do you expect me to do? Start by admitting what you did was wrong, I said. To me, to mom and dad, to the relatives who've been laughing along with you. Own your part in this. He stared at the bottles lined up behind the bar, shoulders rigid. They'll lose respect for me, he whispered. Maybe, I said. Or maybe they'll finally see you as human, the same way I'm asking them to see me. When we returned to the table, the mood had shifted. My mother patted the seat next to her. Sit, Ethan, she said. We were just talking about how proud we are of your sister. We had no idea. He sank into the chair, avoiding my gaze. Then, haltingly, he cleared his throat. I owe everyone an apology, he began. The table quieted. Especially you, Maya. He glanced at me, then looked down again. I've been an ass for a long time. The jokes, the comments, acting like I'm the only one who knows what success looks like. I'm sorry. The words didn't magically erase years of hurt, but hearing them spoken aloud in front of the same people who had laughed at me mattered. It was a crack in the old story. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. We should have stopped it, she said softly. We laughed when we should have listened. My father finally spoke up, his voice rough. I lost my business when you two were kids, he said. I put all my hopes of redemption into Ethan. That wasn't fair to either of you. Suddenly, the family dinner wasn't just about who had more money. It was about the lies we'd all been living with, about worth, success, and whose story got to be told. By the time dessert arrived, a shared platter of small, intricate sweets I'd designed to be eaten with fingers and laughter, the atmosphere at the table had softened. There were still awkward pauses, still old habits trying to reassert themselves, but something fundamental had shifted. My parents asked real questions about my work: what time my days started, how many staff I managed, what my long-term plans were. For the first time, they listened without interrupting to compare me to Ethan. My relatives chimed in with their own stories about careers that didn't look impressive on the outside, but had brought them quiet satisfaction. It was like watching a picture slowly come into focus, everyone realizing that the frame they had been using to judge success was too small. At the end of the night, when my server brought over the check holder as part of our routine, I slid it aside. I meant what I said, I told them. Tonight is on me. Ethan shifted. Let me at least cover the tip, he offered. And this time the offer sounded less like a performance, more like an attempt at genuine contribution. You can leave a tip if you want, I said. Not because you're proving anything, just because you appreciate the service. He nodded, understanding the difference. Outside the restaurant, under the glow of the streetlights, my mother hugged me. It wasn't the quick, distracted squeeze I was used to. It was longer, heavier, with unspoken words. We didn't see you, she murmured. You were right there, and we didn't see you. You saw what you were taught to value, I replied gently. Money, titles, applause. I'm not angry about you wanting those things for us. I'm angry it meant you couldn't respect anything else. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. Can we make it up to you? She asked. I thought about all the years of being dismissed, all the dinners where my stories died halfway through because someone else's achievement seemed more important. You can start by not laughing when someone puts another person down, I said. Especially in this family, you can stop using money as a measure of who deserves respect. You can ask before assuming. My father stepped forward, hands deep in his coat pockets. We'd like to come back here again, he said. As regular customers, if you'll have us. I smiled. As long as you remember you're my guests, not my judges, I replied. Ethan lingered at the edge of the sidewalk, staring at the restaurant sign. I really didn't know, he said quietly when we were briefly alone. I know, I answered. That's the problem? You never asked. He winced. I don't know how to be different overnight. You don't have to, I told him. But you do have to stop using me as a punchline. You do have to think before you speak. And if you catch yourself wanting to feel big by making someone else small, maybe ask what you're running from. He nodded, eyes shining. Deal, he said. And maybe you can show me how you did all this sometime? The business side, the real side. I could use a lesson. There was a time when I would have jumped at the chance to impress him, to prove I was worthy of his attention. Now I weighed my answer carefully. Maybe, I said. When I'm ready. And when you're asking because you respect me, not because you want another way to look successful. He accepted that, and for once, it felt like we were meeting as two flawed adults instead of the old hierarchy of winner and loser. As they walked away, I stood in front of my restaurant and breathed in the cool night air. The neon sign buzzed softly above me, casting a faint glow on the sidewalk. Inside, my staff were laughing as they polished glasses and reset tables for tomorrow. Life would go on. Reservations, deliveries, staff meetings, bills. My value wasn't suddenly higher because my family had seen this place. It had always been here, waiting for me to claim it. That's the lesson I want anyone listening to this story to take away. Your worth is not a group project that your family gets to grade. You can be broke and still deserve respect. You can be wealthy and still be deeply lost. Money reveals some truths, but it hides just as many. What really matters is how we treat each other, especially the people we say we love, when no one is watching and when we think our words are just jokes. If you've ever been the less successful sibling, the quiet cousin, the one everyone underestimates. I hope you remember this. You don't need a restaurant, a company, or a big reveal to prove yourself. You are allowed to set boundaries, to speak up, to stop laughing along when the joke is on you. And if you've ever been the Ethan in someone's life, the one who uses sarcasm to stay on top, maybe ask yourself who you could be if you chose compassion instead of comparison. So tell me, have you ever had a moment when the people who doubted you finally saw who you really are? Would you choose to invite them into your world like I did? Or would you rather keep your peace far away from their table? Share your story. Somebody out there needs to hear it to remember that they're not alone.